The best part of my day is waking up early in the morning and heading out for a run before the rest of the world wakes up. And that early in the morning, it always takes 10 or so minutes for my muscles, my joints to wake up. But when they do, I really get into this flow state and the miles just tick by. And with autumn coming, I'm often enjoying beautiful sunrises at the moment. And it's quiet. The roads, the trails, they're empty. There's nothing to disrupt the flow. And having a run planned makes getting up early so much easier. No hesitation, just grab my gear and go. But that wasn't always the case. When I started running, I always struggled to find the motivation to get out of the door. I would sit by my front door with my running shoes on, trying to build up the motivation to get up and go running. And I just think, can I really be bothered to go running? And this wasn't every day or every run, but I would regularly look for an excuse not to go running. My relationship with running 7 years ago was extremely different. I started running to lose weight and to stay fit whilst I was traveling for work. I entered a marathon as a challenge just to see if I could do it. I never expected to enjoy running a marathon. That wasn't the point. I was training for a goal. I didn't care about the journey. I didn't love training. And I think this played a part in my struggle to find motivation to go running. Motivation is something that I've always struggled with to an extent. I definitely struggled with motivation at school and even in my first few jobs. And I've always struggled to motivate myself with my diet and just to exercise in general. And I think the first time I really cracked this challenge of motivation was in 2013. So about 10 years ago, I worked in this water sports hotel in Greece. And I was out there working in a restaurant, basically to live on a beach and to go out drinking every night. But it was there that I first tried windsurfing. Spent 5 hours on the water, bobbing around, moving absolutely nowhere fast. And it was so hard, but I just completely fell in love with it. And so for the next 2 years, I just completely threw myself at windsurfing. Any spare hour in the day, I'd just go out on the water for as much time as I possibly could. My normal day was basically 6 hours of working in a restaurant and then 6 hours on the water windsurfing. And I developed a deep passion for windsurfing. Even if the wind was terrible, I'd still go out on the water and do light wind freestyle. It didn't matter how tired or hungover I was. If I had spare time, I'd go out on the water. And films fueled that passion. So there was this movie called Minds Wide Open, an incredible film. Still, to this day, one of my favourite sports movies. And even now when I watch it, I get super pumped about windsurfing. And over those years, I never ever got bored of going windsurfing. It didn't matter that I spent hour after hour, day after day, full months windsurfing. And in 2019, my relationship with running started to change in a similar way that my relationship with windsurfing had changed. I started to run more regularly. I went from running 20k a week up to 80k a week. I started running 5 times a week rather than 2 or 3. And running became part of my routine. It became a habit. I started to get uncomfortable on those days when I wasn't running. God forbid when I ever had to take a week off running. And I slowed down my running. I no longer ran every single run as a hard workout. Yes, I'd still do hard quality sessions, but most of my runs were done at a much more comfortable, easy pace. And I started to switch off and relax during these runs. And to the point where I could comfortably hold a long conversation whilst running. And I started running longer, regularly 3 hours every Sunday. And I'd just go out in search of trails. And I also started taking gels on my long runs so I wouldn't get to the end of my run and be completely exhausted. And I really came to love those long Sunday trail runs where I'd just go out for hours, switch off. I wouldn't stress about pace or distance. I'd just make sure I spent a good amount of time out on my legs. And then I started watching running films. And nearly all of them were about ultramarathons, people running crazy distances like 100-mile ultramarathons. Films like The Why or Amongst the Evergreens. And these films really changed my understanding of what's possible with running. It was a complete perception shift for me. And over the past few years, as my relationship with running has changed, I think it's fair to say I've become passionate about running. I love following events like UTMB and Western States. And I love watching YouTube videos of people pushing themselves with long ultra marathons. And I love just going out running, even when it's dark and wet and cold, just there's nothing that stops me from going running at the moment. And that passion is what drives me to wake up at 6 a.m. feeling a bit tired and groggy and just get up and go, grab my gear and go running. No hesitation, no reluctance, it's all gone. And those days when I don't run are extremely challenging now. It's like I've got this itch that I can't scratch. And it's funny to think back to those days when I struggled to find the motivation to go running. Because once I walked through that door and started running, all of that reluctance or hesitation just completely vanished. And it took me years to change my relationship with running. But I don't think running was ever really the issue. It was finding the motivation to start, to put my shoes on and walk through the door. And in the same way with windsurfing in Greece, my problem was never really a lack of motivation. I lacked a reason to be motivated, a reason to care, a reason to get up. And after moving to London, I struggled for years to find my passion. Like windsurfing had left a hole that I just couldn't fill. And it took years for running to fill that gap. But once it did, everything changed.